Then let's get started. Whenever I say something, I usually think that I'm right. And one of the things that my parents bring up and talk about, even up to this day, is a story back when I was in elementary school. When I was in elementary school, I woke up one day, and I really like school. I really like to compete with my classmates. So I really wanted to get to school, and I thought it was a school day. And both of my parents told me it wasn't. I didn't have a phone back then, and I don't have any memory of them having a smartphone as well, so they couldn't simply pull out the day and show me it's Saturday, which it was. I thought it was a school day, and we didn't have any digital devices to prove me wrong. So my dad, just to prove me wrong, decided to take me to school anyways. And based from my perspective, from my intelligent, first grade perspective, there was nothing that could have proved me wrong. How do we know it's actually not a school day? Today we're going to be asking that same question. How do we know? When we're talking about religion and Jesus Christ. The question that I've been given to ask today is, how do we know that Jesus really died? And obviously we can't go back in time with the Avengers and Odyssey time machine or anything like that. But we can look at some evidence that can help us see that Jesus did really die. We're going to look over this at 3 points. First, we're going to talk about the rise of Christianity and how that's a testimony to the existence and death of Jesus. Secondly, we're going to talk about the death of the disciples and their devotion to this idea of Christ and his death. And then secondly, we're going to talk about theories that people, skeptics to Jesus' death, have invented and why they're not true. Let's first talk about the rise of Christianity. Christianity today is one of the 3 biggest religions in the world. Christianity, Hinduism, Islam. It didn't get to this point just by mere coincidence, just by a fairy tale or a story. In fact, according to history post-resurrection, according to the Bible in Luke 2:41, 3,000 people became Christians the day that the disciples saw Jesus after he died and then resurrected. There were numbers of people who did see him afterwards and who did see him die. But actually, according to non-Christian historians in the day, he did die. According to a historian of the time, Josephus Flavius, he said that, quote, "They reported that he had appeared to them after his crucifixion, where he died, and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah concerning whom the prophets have recounted wonders." He wasn't just simply saying that, people are thinking this, that he was reporting historically that there are people, tons of people, thousands of people, that not only saw him die and watched him get crucified, but also saw him afterwards. He wasn't just a person who never existed. All humans die. He wasn't just a person who'd never existed. He was a person who did exist, who people saw, and who people saw die. Josh McDowell said that the message of a risen man could not have been maintained a moment in Jerusalem if the grave was still occupied. Imagine if you're looking at the news. I like to go to news.google.com, see what's going on in the world today, and imagine if there's stories going around about a person who's never existed. It's very easy for you to go and look at different news sites and look at evidence that's just there for you to see if this person actually exists. That same kind of skepticism and availability was there 2,000 years ago. It was really easy to see if somebody existed and whether that person died. Jesus did exist. And that the rise of Christianity today is a testimony to that. And also the rise of Christianity back in the day. But another more, I think, compelling and convicting example is the death of the disciples. In the Bible, Jesus had 12 disciples devoted to him and followed him everywhere he went and gave up their old lifestyles. And these disciples, they died for following this man, Jesus. I'll just mention a few. Peter was one of the lead disciples. He was crucified upside down in Rome. Bartholomew, another one, was skinned alive. Mark was dragged through the streets of Alexandria through a chariot by horses until he died, and they go on until all 12 of them eventually do die. Think of it this way. If there are people who invented something, maybe there was this man Jesus, and did he really die or did he not? We don't really know. Are these people who invented this story going to be so dedicated to it to the point that they're murdered in heinous ways? Just logically speaking, nobody's going to give out under that sort of pressure. The only reason that they would want to stay with it is that it's true. But the final point is alternative theories. There are people who believe, who look at the question, did Jesus really die, and say, well, it's possible that the body was stolen or something, and we don't really know. that doesn't stand up today. The stolen body theory is what it's called. Because, well, one, the disciples, they didn't want to be anywhere near Jesus and the tomb because they could have possibly been taken and murdered too. And secondly, everybody was against them. The Romans were against them because it was causing an uprising and possible chaos, which the governor, Pontius Pilate, didn't want because he could be fired. But also the priests didn't want, because Jesus was overriding the authority of the church at the time, saying that there is a new covenant. Nobody was going to help these disciples. It was impossible for them to steal the body. But secondly, another one is that there's a lost tomb theory, that we don't really know where this tomb is or whether it even exists. However, documentaries come out saying that they find tombs with the name of Jesus, son of Joseph, on it. But the problem with this is in Jerusalem there are 900 tombs, and 71 of them have the name Jesus on it, and 4 had the name Jesus, son of Joseph. So there are plenty of people, and there's no reason why we can't believe that there was a Jesus that the Bible talks about, that people saw and people testified to and people died for, that actually existed. So at the end of the day, when we're looking at the question, did Jesus really die? It kind of asks the question, well, did he really live? He definitely did really live. Skeptics, dedicated skeptics on both sides of the issue, both Christian and atheist, to believe that Jesus did exist. And as a human, everybody also believes that he did die. The question, though, is whether or not his message is true, and should we believe what this man, Jesus, who had a huge impact on history, had to say. And I think that when we look at the rise of Christianity, the dedication of the disciples, and also why we can't invent a theory that actually stands up against it. This man Jesus that did die and exist, that did live a perfect life and did die, he had something to say that was special.